Hey there, welcome back to On the Edge. Today we're diving into 3 wild cave stories that'll make your hair stand on end. Think tight spaces and nasty injuries, but with a twist you won't see coming. Trust me, these aren't your average spelunking tales. You'll get what I mean in a second. And as always, viewer discretion is advised. On a cold Saturday, February 13th, 1965, 3 friends set out on an adventure that ended in unimaginable tragedy. This is the harrowing tale of James Mitchell, a 23-year-old scientist from Winthrop, whose passion for exploring caves led to a chilling and unforgettable disaster. This tragedy would echo through generations, spanning more than 4 decades. James, along with his friends Hetty Miller and Charles Bennett, arrived in Dogville, aiming to explore the infamous Schroeder's Pants Cave. Their first stop was the home of George Lyon, the landowner above the cave. But George wasn't home to warn them about the ice-cold meltwater flooding the cave's passages. With prior permission for their expedition, the trio felt confident as they approached the cave entrance. Eager to explore its depths, and undeterred by George's absence, they entered the cave. They navigated through tight spots like the Lemon Squeeze, the Gun Barrel, and the Z-Turn, finally reaching a spacious chamber with a vertical shaft plunging 80 feet down. Here, their adventure took a disastrous turn. James, ever the adventurer, decided to explore deeper. Lowering himself into the shaft with a safety line and harness, he descended only to be met by a torrent of freezing water. As he ventured deeper, the waterfall grew stronger, and suddenly his line got stuck, trapping his arm. He was helpless, hanging above the abyss with ice-cold water pouring over him. Despite his predicament, James remained calm, reassuring his friends that he would be fine. He tried to release the line and climb to safety, but the line was too cold and wet to grip, and his equipment wouldn't free him. Hetty and Charles, just 10 feet above James, tried desperately to pull him up for 45 grueling minutes. They struggled against the icy torrent, but their efforts proved futile. Realizing the severity of the situation, Charles climbed out to seek help at a nearby farm, but no rescue teams were nearby. The closest help, a National Cave Rescue Team, had to fly in from Washington, D.C. This terrible story became huge news across the country, and the nation held its breath, hoping for a miracle. By the time the rescue team arrived, it was too late. James Mitchell had succumbed to hypothermia. The team tried to recover his body, but the cave walls began to collapse. With the passages narrowing and boulder blocks becoming hurdles, the thought of the cave completely collapsing and trapping the rescue teams inside was a looming question. Ultimately, they had to seal the cave, turning it into a tomb for the young scientist. Many were disappointed and outraged, but the teams did what they thought was best. However, the story doesn't end there. James's death made people truly understand the risk of hypothermia in caving. Paula Garrick, secretary of the British Caving Association, explained that it highlighted how stopping movement during an expedition could lead to deadly cold exposure. At the time of his death, it was common to explore caves in jeans and cotton overalls. Today, cavers usually wear a fleece undersuit with a waterproof PVC coating, a testament to the lessons learned from James's tragedy. Years went by and James's story started to fade away. However, more than 4 decades later, in 2006, George Lyon's grandson Christian, who grew up hearing the tragic story of James, made it his mission to recover James's remains. Christian felt uneasy about the idea of abandoning a person's body, someone who had once been as excited for adventures as he was. With the blessing of James's family and a highly qualified team, Christian set out to bring closure to this tragic story that had haunted him for years. News quickly spread that the body would be recovered from the abandoned cave, and Christian filmed the search process, turning it into a documentary. He and his team retraced James's steps from over 4 decades ago. The passages were as treacherous and collapsed as the stories had warned. Christian descended into the same vertical shaft, confronting the icy, relentless waterfall. Facing this reality after hearing tales of its chilling presence and the agony it inflicted only fueled Christian's resolve to honor his promise. Hours stretched into an eternity as they tirelessly combed through narrow, winding passages. Finally, at a depth of 75 feet, James's bones lay scattered at the bottom of the shaft. Christian was filled with mixed emotions as he fulfilled his mission to bring closure to this heart-wrenching saga. After 4 long decades, James's remains were brought back for a proper burial, providing some solace to his family and friends. The Schroeder's Pants Cave was reopened, giving cavers the chance to explore again. James Mitchell's story ensured that other cave explorers were better prepared, and his legacy continues to impact the caving community. This story is about a Discover New cave and a tragic accident. In late December 1924, Floyd Collins made a discovery that he believed would change his life forever. He found a cave and spent the next several weeks digging deeper into it, but one little mistake left him trapped under rocks, freezing and starving to death. The events surrounding his rescue attempt drew thousands to the cave, even attracting the attention of the president. Yet, none of it helped Floyd. This is the tragic story of Floyd Collins. When Floyd Collins discovered Sand Cave in late December 1924, he saw it as a turning point. The cave was easily accessible to tourists since it was just 100 yards from a highway. Floyd quickly struck a deal with the property owners to get 50% of the profits from the cave's exploration. Excited, he went to work on the cave, but there was no real opening yet, which kept tourists away. Determined, Floyd spent hours every day for the next few weeks digging deeper into the cave, widening the passageways, and removing loose rocks to create a suitable entrance. By January 30th, 1925, he was close to finishing. That snowy morning, Floyd entered the cave with a kerosene lantern. He navigated the darkness and dampness with ease, having grown used to it. He crawled through a tight spot called the Squeeze, which was only 9 inches tall. No one had dared to go beyond this point, until Floyd. Flattening himself as much as possible, Floyd pushed through the narrow opening. The walls, lined with pointy gypsum crystals, made it difficult to move, but he made it through to the other side, where the space was slightly bigger. Ahead was a narrow pit he had previously opened by removing rocks. He carefully climbed down feet first, avoiding sharp rocks. He was thrilled to know that the next drop would lead him to the big cave he desperately wanted to explore. Floyd tied a rope and made the final 80-foot descent. When he reached the cavern floor, he was overjoyed. He looked around in awe, but his lantern began to flicker. He decided to leave quickly before losing the light. Climbing back up, he accidentally dropped the lantern, plunging him into darkness. Despite the setback, Floyd continued pushing through the opening, careful not to dislodge any rocks. But in the dark, he kicked a loose rock that fell on his left leg, trapping it. His attempts to free himself only caused more rocks to fall, pinning him further. By 10 a.m., just a few hours after starting his exploration, Floyd began to scream for help, but no one heard him. Hours passed until the next morning, when 2 property owners, Ed Estes and B. Doyle, along with Doyle's 17-year-old son Jewel, came to check on Floyd. Finding his coat and hat outside, they called his name with no answer. Jewel, being slender, was the only one able to reach Floyd, who was trapped under heaps of gravel and rock. Floyd told Jewel to get his brothers for help. By noon, Floyd's brother Marshall and their father, Pap, arrived to find a crowd at the cave entrance. Marshall and another man tried to dig to widen the tunnel, but couldn't reach Floyd. Homer, Floyd's other brother, arrived later and was devastated because Floyd had asked him to come along that Friday morning, but he didn't. Determined to rescue his brother, Homer ignored the crowd and entered the cave, making contact with Floyd after hours of painful effort. Homer continued removing rocks, but the bonfires outside were melting ice, causing more water to drip into the cave, freezing Floyd further. Homer reassured Floyd and kept working until exhaustion forced him to rest. Reporter Skeets added a light bulb near Floyd and removed rubble, exposing Floyd's legs. Despite their efforts, the rocks couldn't be lifted. The news of Floyd's predicament spread, drawing reporters and spectators. Hotels filled up, prices soared, and hundreds of cars lined the roads. Over 1,000 people gathered outside the cave, unaware their activities weakened the cave walls. On Wednesday afternoon, the cave entrance collapsed, blocking any access to Floyd, though he wasn't hit by falling rocks. On February 5th, a team began digging a shaft to reach Floyd. They monitored his breathing through a light bulb's wire. For days, Floyd remained stuck, without food or water, growing weaker. On February 13th, one worker reported hearing groans near Floyd. But at 1:30 a.m. on February 16th, a worker named Brenner found Floyd, who had passed away. They decided to leave Floyd in the cave, making it his final resting place. Months later, Homer had his brother's body removed for a proper burial. Floyd Collins's tragic story remains a somber reminder of the dangers of cave exploration and the relentless human spirit in the face of adversity. This story is about a tragic incident that occurred on April 5, 1999. A 21-year-old named Robert Kennedy from McGee, Oklahoma, decided to go on an overnight camping trip near the limestone Hermit cave. He was accompanied by his stepbrother, Richard Steeler Jr., and their friend, Ben Keeley from Tulsa. Under the starry Oklahoma sky, the trio talked and shared stories about the region's limestone caves, especially the mysterious Hermit Cave. Although familiar to locals, the cave held secrets that fascinated Robert. He was particularly curious about the undocumented side passages rumored to lead to hidden wonders. Robert, though inexperienced in caving, was excited to explore Hermit Cave. He wore only jeans and a t-shirt, armed with just one flashlight and no protective gear. He was likely unaware of the cave's poor air quality due to inadequate ventilation. Ben had to leave early for work, leaving Robert and Richard to venture into the cave alone. This was risky because caving rules emphasize having at least 3 people, one to stay with a person in trouble and another to seek help. Despite the risks, Robert and Richard decided to go ahead. They easily entered the cave through its wide entrance, navigating the main passage despite the damp, chilly, and dim conditions. On their way back, Robert noticed one of the rumored side passages, known for its complex and narrow layout. This part of the cave was mostly unmapped, but Robert pressed on. The passage was about 150 feet long, winding and difficult to navigate. It required a special technique to maneuver through the cramped shimstone tunnels. He had to move first with his arms, then his shoulders, and finally his legs. As Robert reached the first dangerous section known as the Keyhole Formation, he made a crucial mistake. He squeezed through head first, unaware that he wouldn't be able to reverse with his legs first. Experts always advise going leg first in unknown areas to avoid getting trapped. Already tired, Robert tried to push through the narrow opening, exhaling all the air from his lungs. He soon realized he couldn't go forward, and his torso got tightly wedged between the rock walls. His arms were pinned, one beneath him and the other pushed back by a rock outcropping. Despite his efforts to push back, gravity pulled him deeper, and he found himself trapped with his face above the muddy floor of the cave. Panic set in, and Robert called out for Richard's help. Richard reached him, but realized he couldn't free Robert alone and went to get help. About an hour later, a team of 10 rescuers arrived at the cave entrance, ready to help. The rescue was challenging. The 150-foot distance between Robert and the main passage made it a slow journey for each rescuer, who had to go one at a time. Breathing became difficult as they ventured deeper, so they used a ventilation system to circulate air. The rescuers knew they couldn't drill a shaft to reach Robert, so they used manual tools to widen the Keyhole Formation. Time was running out, and Robert's condition worsened. One rescuer noticed Robert's deteriorating state, but they kept working. Finally, after widening the keyhole crevice, a rescuer reached Robert's feet. Unfortunately, Robert was unresponsive by then. A faint pulse in his legs gave the rescuers hope, but pulling him by his feet didn't work due to the lack of leverage. A pulley system was also discarded because the limestone formations were too soft. The rescuers decided to dig around Robert's body to widen the hourglass-shaped passage and free his trapped torso. The tightness around his chest made it impossible to give him water. After over an hour, they managed to move Robert's body. He was face down in the mud when they pulled him out and brought him to the cave entrance. Paramedics were waiting to assess Robert's vital signs and transport him to the hospital, but it was too late. He showed no signs of life. It's believed that a combination of chest compression and low oxygen levels caused him to lose consciousness quickly. Unable to keep his face up from the muddy floor, Robert tragically passed away. Thanks for exploring this underground tragedy with me. For more caving stories, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next descent.